Whatever the government decides next, they would undoubtedly benefit from taking advice from so much talent across the hospitality industry, such as our esteemed guest today, Robin Sheppard, co-founder and chairman of Bespoke Hotel Group. Robin and his team at Bespoke represent over 120 properties worldwide and are considered the UK's largest independent hotel group. Founded just over 20 years ago by Hayden Fenton and Robert Sheppard, Bespoke have managed over 5,000 rooms and 6,000 employees with assets valued over $525 million. Good afternoon, Robin, and welcome to Let's Renew. And firstly, can we introduce you to Renew Party's youth leader, Alex Gunter, co-host, who has been instrumental in creating Renew's mix of media for positioning the youth voice for the UK's younger political views on renewing politics for generations to come, including this week's newest political media online magazine, Ignite.
And it's promising that we can see a light ahead thanks to the vaccines rollout program in the UK. And yet, so many industries in hospitality, tourism, and the retail sector will continue to suffer for some time until we can drive new business and create jobs for the youth of today, and especially in an industry ranked close to third in overall GDP in the UK. Robin, can you tell us how your company has dealt with this pandemic? What has been the effect on your business, and how you might encourage others to come through and renew our faith in this hospitality and tourism industry and beyond? And in light of this government's possible appointment of a Minister for Hospitality, what do you believe is the number one priority for this appointee to get jobs renewed again?
Well, that's quite an introduction, and thank you so much for giving me the stage. I was just saying to Alex a few moments ago when he asked me how I was, I described myself as being jabtastic because I got my jab yesterday, and I've decided this word should, if I refer to that little term, I hope you'll forgive me. I guess what it does is herald perhaps a new beginning, a new dawn, a reinvention, and a sense that we've just had the darkest hour and maybe we've got some bright sunny uplands to come. I don't necessarily believe a word that comes out our Prime Minister's mouth, but that's my personal opinion. But there are some scientists out there who've done a stellar job. What's going to happen, I suppose, is similar to what happened when foot and mouth hit this country 20 years ago, when the very people get culled or lose their previous roles, have to perform a level of reinvention, or just are simply reappointed as hotels reflate. However, I think it's going to be a very imbalanced economy that people come back to, in that there will be an onrush of people wanting a leisure break or a treat or some indulgence as a respite from what they consider is the torture they've been through. But at the same time, I think there'll be a real odd hybrid meeting environment where people will go to meetings, but there won't be necessarily a room full of conference delegates. There'll be a hard core of people who have to be there because they're, say, presenting, but the vast balance of people, I think, will be dialing in just in the way that we're having this conversation now. So I think Zoom is here for good. Hybrid meetings are definitely on the rise. What does that mean for the youth? Well, the hospitality industry has always been very good at giving youth its chance to shine. Relatively few qualifications, but a good appetite, good attitude, you can go a long way. Best piece of career advice I ever had was to zigzag. Zigging, I did a bit of zagging, and you learn pretty soon as you drift from one job to the next what not to do. And as an accumulated process, I suppose I now am pretty expert at what not to do. Whether I'm any good at what to do is a moot point, but certainly in terms of learning how to do things badly, you get your experience. And I defy anybody to tell me that there is a more exciting environment with more opportunity than the hospitality sector right now. People want and are hugely reminded of how important travelability is, such a fundamental component in terms of who and what we are. So I think all of those augur well for a reflation of the economy and a lot of jobs being slightly invented, but also reinvented and also just re-employed. So I do think the future is reasonably bright.
Thank you very much, Robin. And again, I have to extend the welcome that Stephen's already given you to our Hospitality and Tourism podcast series. Congratulations on all your experiences. And I totally agree with you. I think we're going to enter a really interesting new stage right now. We're going to have a lot of people who are eager to burst out of their lockdown bubble, myself included, perhaps. And when everybody is feeling as jabtastic as you, then we'll all be really, really excited to get back into the leisure and tourism and hospitality industry. But of course, it's going to be a very different world. And I think one of the biggest changes is people working in that industry. They've a lot of them have lost their jobs, and of course, a lot of them are quite young. But how important is the younger employees in the hospitality industry for your business and for the industry as a large?
Well, it's a vital component, of course, but please let's not feel too sorry for ourselves within hospitality, because young people have been losing jobs in pretty much every sector unless they're delivering Amazon parcels from home to home. So we're not on our own, but I do think it's so important that we put some confidence and some singularity into our communication, which is one of the real benefits of lockdown, is that Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality has provided that lone, very erudite voice on behalf of our industry. And she and other luminaries like Robin Hudson and the Bosey family have put in place a very crisp and clear communication to the Houses of Parliament as to what we want and why there should be a Minister for Hospitality. At last, we've decided to call ourselves Hospitality.
Yeah.
We've got some great messaging. It's very clear. It's not indisputable. They're not grey or tangential in terms of what we're asking. And I certainly was very passionate and one of the movers, not necessarily a shaker, but certainly a mover in getting the Minister for Hospitality position going. And I sincerely hope that we're able to secure it. Whether that person is then in post for a meaningful length of time to deliver on the promises that we're hoping for is another point. But past experience says this is for tourism have lasted about 8 months. So a Minister for Hospitality really needs to stick around for several years so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this minister is going to be really important in making sure that hospitality is on the right track. But what about other initiatives? What was your opinion of ETAC to help out and other such things back in August? And should they be re-implemented now?
Well, it was spectacularly badly timed, but a brilliant concept, and it worked. So yes, please, Dishy Rishi, can you give it to us again? And put the same rules and regulations in place, because it definitely worked and it will spur people on. If he doesn't back that up, however, with a meaningful dialogue between landlords and tenants to rescue cafes, restaurants, and a number of hotels from really insurmountable issues currently between landlord and tenant, then the rest is academic. The help out to eat out will be simply a headline, but it won't be addressing the core issues or help negotiate tenancy agreements that prevent people collapsing their companies. When you see the likes of Cafe Nero, Leon, even Pret a Manger, just absolutely fundamental components of our contemporary high street, blocked up from trading, CVA agreements all over the place. It's been horrendous. That is, of course, before we start to factor in the mood behind Brexit, and particularly amongst young people who have come to Britain, Poland, and other Eastern Bloc countries, and whether they still feel they're wanted here or whether there's any merit in staying.
On the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow this year, climate and the environment will continue to be a key focus for our industry as well as many others. What opportunities do you see for the sector emerging from the rise of more eco-conscious consumers, and what are some of the things your business is doing to go green?
Well, I think as a general public rule, we have to acknowledge the incredible impact that not traveling has had on our consumption, particularly in terms of fuel. And it would be very silly to go back to our wicked ways of the past without saying, how can we learn from this and consume fuel in a more efficient way than we used to? That is probably above my pay grade and level of responsibility in society. But the challenge is, the gauntlet has been thrown down. We can massively reduce consumption at a stroke by behaving in a different way. So that's first thing. Second thing, I suppose, is a combination of small measures. Now, whether that's going back to the old method of recycling all your slop that you had in your kitchen, working with your own rainwater rather than always having to have fresh water, putting in a new type of burning machinery that you can now get, particularly for remote locations where you're reliant upon more natural energy, and then tapping in with various associations and other structures who are very keen to make us purchase and promote more eco-friendly fuel. In terms of the carbon footprint, I think we have to make this something that just sits on the agenda underneath profit and loss account. Before you get into staff training, you probably need a line that just covers green. We've been talking about it for too long. It now needs to sit at the lowest level in the heads of department, which, as well as the senior boards in hotel companies, hospitality businesses, need to make sure it's on and actively in the agenda on a regular basis. So we're attempting to do all those things. Ufi Ibrahim, who used to be in charge of the British Hospitality Association, is now leading a very august body to promote the green future. And I'm sure we can get a name check into Ufi at some point with her contact details, but she's leading the charge and the discussion with government and other interested parties to make sure the energy that we consume is much more eco-friendly. But David Attenborough is right. You know, if we've only got one planet, we can't afford to mess it up. And even though we've been to Mars, you can see what's happened to a messed up planet just there. And we don't want to be like Mars. We quite like being planet Earth if we can.
Absolutely, and I want to be able to still enjoy hospitality as well. I mean, if the world ends, then that's it. It really is that is it. Quite scary time, isn't it? Anyway, looking less into the distant future, obviously we want to kickstart hospitality again, like never before, in the next few years. And our previous guest mentioned that she expects a 20s, a roaring 20s, just like we saw in the United States. How can we ensure that that actually happens? And how can we really reinvent hospitality to make it the best it possibly ever can be?
I think the market will do a lot of that for us, but the market will split into two. What we learned from the lockdown gap last year was that where there's a leisure break or reward trip to the Lake District or the Cotswolds or to the coast, a bucolic Arcadian setting, then that's what people want and will give themselves, partly because they can't go overseas, partly because they think it's the right thing to do, and partly because the range of stock and choice in the UK is still really, really strong. Where I think we'll see a lag is on the business side. Business conferences, the amount of corporate travel that's encouraged or allowed will be way behind what happens on the domestic front. So if you're a city centre corporate hotel, you've got to come up with some leisure angle to make sure you're popular. Otherwise you'll get left behind. So I think there'll be a desire to celebrate. I think there'll be a desire to get to enjoy the travel component. And we also at the same time live in an era where experience is held much more dear than possession. Certainly if I look at my own children who are in their late 20s, early 30s, they're all about experience rather than saying, I want to buy a 3-piece suite and I'm staying at home to save up for it. So I think the youth of the market will determine just how much novelty and adventure is put into people's travel habits. So from that perspective, I think it will be a roaring 20s. From a corporate perspective, I think it might be a little whimper 20s.
Yeah, it's a shame about the corporate travel because being younger, I haven't had as much experience of it, but on a couple of trips I have been on for various things, I've always loved the experience, and I'm going to miss it if it's all going to be done on Zoom from now on. So fingers crossed that the corporate leisure system doesn't disappear and it is able to reinvent itself.
Yeah, but it will take longer to come back, and we need to be patient with it and not get too concerned that we just need to gear up in the right way and anticipate it arriving on a much slower level.
Yeah. So imagine you're a younger person who's just finished university right now, and they're looking to find work, and they've done a degree relating to hospitality or tourism around that field. Could you give them any concrete advice on how to get in and really cement themselves in a long career, a successful career in the hospitality and tourist industry?
Well, the key advice is get to know people. And that you don't do that by WhatsApp or by messaging. As soon as you're allowed to physically meet people, get in front of them. If you can get to work for famous people, even better, because when you go for the next job, having worked for someone famous, people will feel more kindly towards you because they'll assume you're more competent than you was because you worked for someone well known rather than someone they've never heard of before. Probably be prepared. Don't be too proud. Don't go to any interview saying, I want to be the managing director of this business and I'm 23. You need to go in and say, I want to work my way up and will you help me to do so? So you probably need to go in maybe one rung lower than you'd ideally like, but swallow your pride, get the gig and prove yourself. And as soon as you show any competence or level of skill and particularly ambition, I'm sure the industry will take you to its heart and cherish you. Teaching people to have that sass, I don't know that I can do that in this particular session, but you probably got to be prepared to sell yourself unashamedly. And the one piece of final advice I'd go, if you do get an interview, make sure at the end when they say any questions, make them know that you really, really want the job and you want to work for them. Don't assume that somehow they're going to spot your magnificence from underneath a large rhubarb leaf. You're there and you're selling yourself. So ask the killer question to close the deal.
I suppose a good fun follow-up onto that, as I'm sure you've probably interviewed many people before. What's the best line somebody you've ever interviewed has ever given you?
It was actually someone else who was conducting an interview who put an alarm clock on the table and said to the interviewee, research says that you can tell whether you want to hire someone within the first 7 minutes. So I'm going to set this clock to 8 minutes to cover the minute I'm telling you this. 7 minutes for me to decide whether I like you or not, and then we can get 40 minutes of our lives back if we don't like each other. Of course, most candidates were completely shaken by this and put off their stride and had never heard of it. But it sorted the wheat for the chaff, and he hired the ones who thought that was a real laugh and went with it. So
the first interview I had at a hotel was in the Doyle Group Hotel in Dublin, Robin.
Oh, yeah.
And I was interviewed by P.V. Doyle, actually, and I went on, of course, to know his kids quite well over the years and so on. But the first thing he asked me, he said, how do you feel about cleaning toilets? And I just stared at him. I wasn't sure, was this a real question or not? And I said, I'm okay with that. And he said, all right, well, go in and clean that one and come out and we'll have a chat. I did get the job.
But you remember it,
Oh, gosh, I do, yes, very much so, very much so. Well, I love your example. Sorry, Alex, these are some, you might get there eventually with these sort of questions on your first interviews out of university,
Well, actually, the Renew Party needs someone to clean the toilets at the moment, so it's not a bad way to go. All righty, so one final big question from us, really, and I have to say thank you for everything you've had so far. So thank you very, very, very much indeed. The big question from us, though, is when we do see a return to normal or the new normal or the way that we expect things to appear, will you join us for a drink sometime? And we'll have a proper chat and a normal conversation instead of this silly Zoom stuff, eh?
I would be delighted. Would like to think that I've managed to moderate my drinking habits during lockdown. Of course, the first temptation is to make gin o'clock around about 2 PM. I've managed to resist that as far as I can. But actually, what I long for is having a drink in a pub or a convivial social centre where you can talk to people and enjoy the crack. And the idea of drinking at home or just with 1 or 2 other family members nearby is pretty hostile, I must admit, and something that stagnates, sadly, after a period of time. So much of my wife's sick of the sight and sound of me now, but until the Tanqueray comes out.
Thanks, Robin. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties. I've always wanted to say that during interviews, but the Renew Party's brought that on very easily for us. But I did listen to, I think it was your last interview on a YouTube channel, I think it was. And which it's just, I know you have tons of experience in the hospitality industry that have fun stories about them. So I do look forward to that gathering where we can all come together. And we at the Renew Party are going to wish Bespoke Hotel Groom every success as you move forward. And we hope that you'll join us again in one of our events shortly down the road.
That will be a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you for your time today, Robin.